Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I work half-time in a university and half-time in what we call the HSE, which is basically the NHS in Ireland. So I'm here on behalf of a number of my colleagues who are also here from SHAPES. And you can see there, smart and healthy aging through people engaging in supportive systems. It's quite a large consortium, so led by Maynooth University. We work with, there's about 210 people in the consortium. There's always people leaving and always people joining, so it's a bit of a sort of revolving door. We have 36 partner organizations, from larger scale industry to SMEs, government and academia, working across 14 countries, and we're funded by the European Commission to around 21 million. And we're also importantly working with around 2,000 older people. So can't really describe the breadth of it, but just to give you a flavour, we're looking at the integration of a broad range of technological, organisational, clinical, educational and societal solutions to facilitate exactly the sort of thing that we're here to talk about today. And an aspect of this is the SHAPE digital solutions. And one of the, I guess, important themes here is that we're not focused on the digital solutions, we're focused on what they do for people, because the solutions come and go, and anything that we set up technically that will work today will probably be obsolete in about 5 years' time. But the ecosystem, the SHAPES ecosystem, the context in which that happens, I'll say a little bit more about, that should be more enduring. And then the marketplace, of course, we need to stimulate both innovation within industry and then opportunity. And Ian mentioned earlier about the importance of equitable opportunity. So this idea of market shaping, which indeed the UK has been one of the champions in. But we're also going to develop from this project recommendations on a Europe-wide basis. However, I have a confession to make, and that confession is that we don't know what we're doing. Don't tell anybody in Brussels. Even more, we're actually quite proud of the fact that we don't know what we're doing. So hopefully you would agree with this. To be person-centered, you shouldn't know what you're doing, but you should know how you're doing it. So we do know how we're doing things. So for instance, we, as part of this project, started with older people in terms of learning from their experience, developing personas, developing use cases, working out what it was older people needed to do to have a good life, and what role might some technologies play in that, but also many other things other than technologies would be hugely important. So a key ethos of the project is about path finding rather than necessarily fitting into existing services. So the essence of person-centered services is the service fitting the person rather than the person fitting the service. It's a big ask, but in a digital age, it becomes increasingly possible. Imagine what we can do with personalized medicines now by linking up to people's genetic predispositions. We should be able to do exactly the same with phenotypes, people's behaviors, by looking at the huge range of digital possibilities there. Okay, so this is the hugely ambitious challenge that Ian has presented us with. Can we design an ISO standard of living? it's really very fundamental and shocking challenge, because each sort of epoch comes up with a new challenge which seems impossible, and then it becomes history and it's been done. And I think in 10 years, this will become something that has been done. And hopefully an important part of addressing this starts here. Well, one of the things in my role as clinical lead for disability services in Ireland come across very frequently is the idea of confusion between a standard and uniformity. That people often think that a standard means everything has to be the same everywhere. That's really a misunderstanding of the potential of different living environments. So you want the same standard of living, but you may seek to achieve that in very different ways. And that should reflect the resources available, the sort of services that are usually there, the systems that already exist, the abilities of individuals themselves, and so on. And we heard earlier there in terms of the UN Habitat presentation about the focus on increasing urbanization, particularly in lower income settings. So I think it's really important that our standard of living shouldn't be a standard which is focused just on a Western conceptualization of a good living, as it were. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Malta, and one of the people there was very adamant, making an excellent point, I thought, that services and products are not a good living. We shouldn't think that services are going to provide a good living for people. They're hopefully a necessary facilitator for other things. And as we've just seen from Erin's presentation, they're a facilitator of how people can lead a valuable life in a context that's personally meaningful for them, and where there's somebody in their community. So a standard need not be a product or a service. It can also be a process. And I think that's what I'd really like us to think about in terms of an ISO standard, moving beyond the idea of a product to a process. And that process might, for instance, involve the ethics, which I know that Sari is leading within the SHIPS project, and the code of conduct within this work. We've recently just published a paper called Just Digital in Nature Communications, which looks at the idea of how do you promote social justice through digitization. At the same time, how can we harness particularly the very big multinationals around digital? Many of them are actually headquartered for Europe in Dublin, and we're aiming to have a sort of event there that harnesses both the economic opportunity and, I guess, the ethical obligation that comes along with that opportunity through a sort of what I fancy might be a Dublin Digital Declaration for doing good things. I lost the alliteration a bit at the end there. Also, we're involved in work developing new models of governance with WHO. And these models of governance, really importantly, obviously have the service user as a key part of that model. This is a huge challenge to health professions like myself, who are used to being positioned as experts and to tell people what is good for them. Again, with a person-centered approach, that person is the expert, and you have to try and translate your knowledge into a meaningful proposition for them. And then in terms of universal design and accessibility, of course, the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disability should be a cornerstone of all this work. And even what so many years after 2006, when it was introduced, still find lots of people don't know what the UN CRPD is. So any sort of ISO standard has to be rights-based and hinging off many of the articles that will allow this work to develop, real momentum internationally. So the design thinking approach is an example of this idea of a process rather than a product. It's not knowing what to do, it's knowing how to do things. And I would see three things, just in conclusion, as being crucial. One is this idea of a standard of living. Another one is the notion of establishing sustainable processes that are not dependent actually on what's happening right now and where the technology is right now, but are much more sort of forward thinking. And then this idea of market shaping. There has to be a market that is incentivizing for innovation and for business, and a market that is socially responsible at the same time. And these two things are very possible if they're approached on a macro level. So thank you very much. Look forward to the ongoing discussion, and thanks to Ian for the opportunity. Thank you.